Welcome to EduTalk Collaborative Conversations, the show where passionate educators converge to talk about all things teaching. In every episode of EduTalk, we delve into an insightful educational research study and hear from a dynamic panel of educators who discuss the study and translate the findings into tangible tools for our everyday endeavors in education. Join us as we transform education together, one conversation at a time. Hello, fellow educators, and welcome to the premiere, the very first episode of EduTalk Collaborative Conversations. This is the show where passionate educators converge to talk about all things teaching. I am your very excited host, Jeni and I cannot wait for you to hear about this episode's study and to introduce to you the very first panel here on KPAO in the studio. I am thrilled you're joining us today. You are a very important part of this growing community of empowered educators. So, without further ado, let's delve into the very first study. Classroom teachers are recognized as the most important factor when it comes to student achievement. The difference between a highly effective and an ineffective teacher is significant. In fact, it can mean the difference of up to a year's worth of learning. Building principles are the second most important variable in student achievement. That means the relationship between teachers and principals is extremely important. Knowing that, I can't think of a better way to kick off EduTalk with this topic that we're going to look at today. In this very first episode, we're going to explore the article, The Role of Teacher Leadership and How Principals Influence Classroom Instruction and Student Learning. It's a thought-provoking study conducted by James Sebastian, Elaine Allensworth, and Hagen Huang, published in 2016. Historically, research on school leadership was narrowly concentrated on the principal's influence. However, more recent studies have expanded this view to encompass a more inclusive understanding of leadership roles in schools, including that of teachers. The concept of distributed leadership has become increasingly prevalent, especially in theory. However, its empirical foundation is still emerging. So this current study we're exploring today contributes to the empirical data by analyzing how both principal and teacher leadership, two both important roles, interact and contribute to the improvement of student achievement. Every research study sets out to answer important questions. So in straightforward language, this study aimed to answer two questions. Number one, does the way teachers lead affect how principal leadership improves student learning? And number two, through what internal school mechanisms does the leadership of principals influence student success, either directly or indirectly through the leadership roles of teachers? In this study, the researchers adapted a conceptual framework proposed by Burke et al. In 2010. It posits that leadership is central to school progress, shaping teaching and learning with the key facets of professional development, or actually professional capacity, learning climate, and parent-community ties. It recognizes that a school's unique contextual factors, including socioeconomic and demographic characteristics, impact nearly every element within the institution. Now, while past research often blended principal and teacher leadership roles, this study delineates the two. To understand how different leadership roles in schools impacted student achievement, the researchers looked at how well students in Chicago's elementary schools did on standardized tests, specifically the ISAT, as students progressed from 3rd to the 8th grades. They gathered insights from surveys filled out by both teachers and students in 534 elementary schools in the Chicago Public School District about the way in which schools were run and how things were taught. These surveys were given every year over the course of multiple years to see the change over time. To figure out the link between school leadership and how well students do in school, the researchers used something called structural equation modeling, or SEM. Think of SEM like a web that connects school principals' actions to the things like school climate and how much students learn. This was done by looking at lots of schools, remember 534 of them, to see overall patterns. To make sure the researchers were fair in their comparisons, they adjusted the data for differences between schools, like size, for example. They used special software to make sense of all of this data and to see how everything was connected. For the nitty-gritty, you can read the full article. The study illuminates the significant influence that principal leadership exerts on student academic progress, both directly and indirectly through the empowerment of teacher leadership. This influence manifests in two predominant ways. First, principal support enhances the learning climate, which ultimately elevates the quality of classroom teaching. And second, by affirming teacher development or empowering teacher leadership and bolstering professional development, principals lay the groundwork for improved instructional practices, which also in turn impact positively student learning outcomes. As you look at the web, larger numbers signify more powerful, potent interactions or stronger relationships. Furthermore, one of the findings of the study revealed that the overall learning climate within a school is a critical factor in student success, even surpassing the quality of classroom instruction. Now, principals can try many ways to help students do better. However, not everything they do is going to have a significant impact. What this study found is that a positive learning climate matters a lot when it comes to supporting students. When a school is safe and organized, students do better and achieve higher. In summary, today's study by Sebastian et al. Provides empirical support to the potent synergy between teacher and principal leadership in promoting student learning. This backs up the idea of distributed leadership, the belief that everybody's leadership efforts are important for making schools better and students more successful. The key takeaway is clear. Effective leadership calls for a collective endeavor where principals and teachers work together. In other words, good leadership is a team effort. Coming up next, we're going to engage with our very first panel of educators, so stay tuned for an inspiring conversation. We'll be right back. At EduTalk Collaborative Conversations, we want to shine a light on the heroes of education. There's a lot of them. Do you know an educator who's making a positive impact in their school, community, or district? You can recognize them by nominating them for our monthly Educator Spotlight. Each month, we will feature one inspirational educator who's altering the academic landscape for the better. In other words, they're making a difference. Help us celebrate their exceptional contributions to learning and leadership by nominating them today.
Please note that the opinions and views expressed by the host and panelists on this show are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of their employers or affiliated organizations.
Hey everyone, welcome back to EduTalk Collaborative Conversations. I am your host, Jeni Langfeld, and this is the very first episode. And there is something special about firsts. And I can't wait for you to meet our panelist, our very first panelist. So up first, I want you to expand your network today. Katie, tell us about yourself.
Hey, my name is Katie Lyon, and I have been a teacher for 8 years, going on 9. Let's see. I started wanting to be an educator because I had a passion for presenting. Like, the art of presentation is just really important to me, and you can really take different avenues and pathways. You can, oh goodness, I'm nervous.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
Okay, so anyways, but yes, I've been a teacher 9 years. I worked at a school for 8 years, and then I just recently opened up my own tutoring business.
Amazing.
Yep, and that's been wonderful. And before I was a teacher, I was a leasing consultant.
Okay.
I know that was something that you were questioning me about. And so yeah, I was a leasing consultant and then went to college to become a teacher. So
I did not know that about you. I love that. Up next, Mr. Wormington.
Yes, Ben Wormington, and I was I'm OPS guy, born and raised. Was a Beveridge Bulldog, Burke Bulldog, and then went to the Marines after 9/11.
Oh,
so
and another Bulldog.
Yep, another Bulldog in the Marines. So did 8 years in the Marines, 3 tours overseas. Wanted to be a dad and wanted to be a husband, and didn't see the military as being very conducive to that. So got out, finished my undergrad, and then did about almost 10 years just in like business. So I was an investment advisor and then a recruiter for accounting and finance, and still felt empty. Like I felt a sense of service when I was in the military, and have been looking for that ever since. And both my folks are teachers, and I finally just decided it was time to go back to school and get my master's. And now I'm a second year, 8th grade social studies teacher at in OPS here.
Beautiful. Thank
Yep.
you. And Chris.
Hello, I am Chris Denton, and I am currently serving as the proud principal at EA Kreft Primary School in the Lewis Central Community School District. I have over 20 years experience in education from a large district, have done everything from being a paraprofessional all the way to working at the district level office, loving the role as a principal. And we had joked about that we knew each other, and in the moment that we were here, we would realize, and I got to facilitate your first new teacher meeting.
Oh.
There you go. So now I remember where we met.
Yep. How am I
Amazing.
doing?
You're doing
I'm
fantastic.
here.
Year 2, you made it.
Look at me.
Done. We
Yeah.
made it. I love it. Okay, so we're going to dive into this study specifically and talk about its implications. So Katie, you're up first.
Okay.
So drawing from your almost decade
Yeah.
of experience in education, will you share ways with us in which administrative leadership within the institution you've been at has worked to empower teachers to assume leadership roles, or just how you have assumed leadership roles, and then what has that impact had on your school's culture?
So in my 8 years of teaching, I had three different really different types of leaders, if you will. One was more of that, dictator, I'm going to do it, we're going to do it this way, this is why, and that was the way it was. And then I had another leader of mine, a good mentor for 3 years. It was my first 3 years of teaching, Kim Blomenberg. She really laid great foundation for me. She held my hand, through her leadership, teaching me, modeling, coaching. It was just what I needed for beginning
Yep.
to be the first couple years of teaching. It was just what I needed. It gave me a backbone, and it gave me courage, which to then have my next leader, which just so happens to be sitting here. For a few years, I had you, 3 years or so, and your leadership style was different. I like to call it the put it in your lap type of leadership style.
Okay.
Because if ever I came to you with a problem, or I just, I was identifying something was wrong and needed to be fixed or looked at, you would just propose a question right back at me. And I was a little unsure about this leadership style. I was very skeptical. I thought, do you want me to answer all these questions for me? This is not what I'm used to. And, but it was exactly what I needed, and it was perfect. And I thought it was so weird and wonky, but you were able to present questions to me for me to answer and be my own leader, but yet carve that pathway and give me tools, whether it be a study or a book or a person to speak to. And you carved the pathway and kind of led me down that way, but you let me be in the driver's seat. And that was the leadership style that I got last, in my 8 years before I opened my own business, my own tutoring business. And those all have had impacts on me.
Yeah.
But, referring back to the study, that last one right there, where the teacher is driving that ship, but yet, you as my administrator, you as my leader, you were guiding me along that process. That was the most impactful. And I saw that trickle down into the people that I worked with, in our meetings. You put it in our lap, you let us drive the ship. And it was just the most beautiful thing meetings were so beautiful. We were working together, and we were succeeding. Data showed that the kids were just on fire. And then you'd walk into my classroom, and you could feel that they were empowered. Even though it was hard, we had an I can do this attitude, and we're going to solve these problems. And that, it was school culture, school climate. And thanks.
I had no idea this was where that was going to go, and thank you.
You're welcome.
I did not pay her to say anything.
No.
So Chris, you've held many different roles in education. I didn't know you were a para. I
did.
love that.
Yeah.
So now as a building leader, can you talk to us about how teacher leadership has shaped your building culture?
Oh, absolutely. Without the level of knowledge that your staff brings,
Yeah.
because I'm new to a whole completely different culture,
Yeah.
right? Spent 20 years in one district and now in a very small district in another state. Everything is different. So the culture is shaped really by not only the teachers that are holding those formal positions, right? Like I have champions for MTSS, champions for PBIS, all of those types of very specific roles, but there's the informal leadership. They're the ones that hold the knowledge, they hold the culture, they hold the history, and they guide how we can shift into newer practices, because they can bridge the gap between here's what prior knowledge was to where we want to take our students and take our staff. So that leadership is so important within the staff, but not only talking teachers. I like that you bring up that paraprofessional role, because our paraprofessionals also are those leaders that don't hold necessarily a formal position, but they're the ones that are shaping the culture, because they're bringing the positive attitude, the can-do spirit, the continuing to learn, continuing to give students a new chance every single day. So that informal leadership, I think, is really what's powerful and not always delved into as much in studies.
Yeah, so good. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, Ben, you're our newbie. You're 2 years into this gig, which I think is a benefit because you have a fresh perspective on leadership in educational settings. So what does teacher leadership look like in your current building? And what impact has that had on your practice?
Well, I'm fortunate that we've had, so there's a principal change when I came in my first year. And so that was interesting to watch, to see how a new person comes into a building who's had an established, culture, whatever it may be, and then have their own, everybody goes in with their own aura, and how am I going to impact this? What can I do? And so I think the principal came in with that, but he took, from my observation, kind of a wait and see. Like, let's just see let's go through this. They talk about the whole year of teaching and what the emotions we go through, the kids go through, the building goes through. Like, let's just see what happens while still putting some supports in place that I feel like our staff and students need at the time. And then coming into this year, there were very specific, very calculated changes that were put in place when it came to MTSS. And then when it came to emphasis about what things really he wanted to see done in the classroom, along with our instructional facilitator, right? So there was that, certainly that delegation in saying, like, yes, I set the vision, but we have a person here who does instructional facilitating. So like we see that role elevated. We see the role of our administrators filling their function that they're supposed to fill, counselors filling their function they fill, teachers filling their function that they fill, and with the some of the staff changes. I think kind of what you were talking about, there's a positive aspect of people that hold the culture. There can also be a negative aspect of some people that hold the culture, or experiences that in order for a building to turn over a new leaf in certain areas, sometimes it takes some different people that are ready for something different. Not good or bad, just different. But you do need everybody moving in the same direction, and you need a willingness to try from across the board for the staff. And I think we've really seen that this year.
That's awesome. Okay, Katie, I'm coming back to you.
Okay.
So last time you shared about like different types of administrative leadership you've seen and its impact, and you've taught for 8 years. Now you're operating your own business that is thriving and meeting a very important need in our community. And perhaps maybe one day you will want to lead a group of educators or start your own school. What are your ideas for empowering teacher leadership?
Okay, well, I think there's something really important to hit on with this question, and that's just the feeling that I had 3 years ago or so about education, and then what I feel now.
Okay.
And I think that it's important to understand that to then answer your question. So 3 years ago, I found myself feeling hopeless at teaching, and I just found myself really trying to, float to the surface. And I found just a lot of problems, and not necessarily just in my school, because my school, the one I taught at, it's different. It was data driven, explicit, just different than what you would find in just a public education system. But again, everybody has their own struggles. But in general, education it's like a big ball of of yarn that's all tangled together with these problems or solutions, and it's all in there. And I just felt like just very overwhelmed with it.
Yeah.
But I just recently, in the last 6-9 months, I just started looking at it differently. And then I thought to myself, I'm 36 years old, and I'm grateful because yes, we're down here, we're in this yarn ball, but there's a future, and I get to be a part of that. And I get to be a person that can help pull those pieces of yarn out so we can look at them under a magnifying glass like this study does, and take a look at what does have positive impact on the way we function in education and the outcomes of it. And I'm empowered by that. So just looking at it like that has helped me to overcome a lot of feelings, and then look at it, studies like this, and let it come into my leadership skills and style, and to come into my business.
Yeah.
And yes, possibly my own school someday.
Yeah.
And I love that these talks are happening, and I love that somebody is doing something about it, because it needs to happen.
Yeah.
We can, as we have so much potential as humans.
Yep.
And as teachers, we're like the best, and we can do it. But there's a lot on a teacher's plate in this ball of yarn. You know, we are like, whew, there's so much there. And so leaders need to be there, and roles need to be divvied out and accepted, and that needs to happen, so we can help guide these teachers and show them the way, and then let them lead. Does that make sense?
Makes so much sense.
It was good.
I know, that was a great.
I'm like,
I know.
I'm like, we are in it right
We're
now. This
in
is
it.
the conversation. These
This
are the
is
things.
it.
We're doing the
We're
things that
doing
need
the
to be
things.
done. That's
Yeah.
cool. Well said.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so Chris, last time you talked about the influence teacher leadership has on culture. Tell me about what impact it has on student achievement.
It has a major impact, especially when leadership provides the structures
Okay.
so that staff can take on leadership roles. So for instance, having a staff member notice that something isn't going right in your day-to-day business as a school. My responsibility is not necessarily to solve it, but to bring the right people around the table to address it and fix it. So if your dismissal isn't working, then let's bring a group together. Let's figure it out from your lens, because you see it at all different points of view.
Yeah.
So that's one piece of it,
So good.
right? The next piece is instructionally, where does the teacher leadership come from? And it comes from when you provide the structure for them to have professional learning communities where we are following a structure to identify what should I be teaching, what's really the most important, so that I can ensure that all students succeed, and letting some of that other stuff go, and being okay with letting that other stuff go. And by go doesn't mean I don't teach it. It means I don't heavily assess it. I don't follow up and do the reteaching with it. I introduce it, I move on. I focus on these things, but I have to provide the structure for them to have the meetings and the conversations, and I have to provide the permission that it's okay to let that stuff go. That's not what's important right now. What's important is the decisions that you're making collectively. That's where the leadership comes in, and then I can hone in. I think of one of our kindergarten teams has been working, and they're really learning the official kind of PLC process, and they've identified now through the process early on that they didn't necessarily have a strategic way that they were teaching alphabet, phonics, phonemic awareness. They had a process, they were all doing the right thing, but they weren't all moving the train in the same direction, or they weren't collaborating with what's really the most evidence-based, most effective practice. They were able to collaborate, figure that out, and then identify sooner students who needed different supports. So now we have students that are achieving far earlier than if we had waited and just went through the normal cycle. We had to have those leaders in place to have those conversations to figure that stuff out.
Yeah, that is so well said. My philosophy is that teaching is a team sport. Yeah,
absolutely.
And we need each other.
Yep.
So good.
Better together.
Better together. Okay, Ben, my next question for you is, oh, this is good. So you're new-ish, and I'm going to say that 5 more times.
I love it.
But even in your newness, I know that you have stepped up and led in different ways. So talk to me about ways you've led with your own rich history and experience.
So I said I was in the service, so I have crash course leadership for 8 years, combat
sure.
experience. I also was an instructor for 2 years where I went to school, formal school. I had leaders in those environments that it was extremely high trust, extremely high stakes as far as what we were given the authority to do.
Yep.
And coming into this environment, I didn't know what to expect. When I first came into the school, I'm also a high initiative person, high passion, and I spread myself way too thin because I got, there's like all these needs.
Yep.
You've got kids that need tutoring. You've got clubs and sports that need sponsors. You have kiddos that have an unbelievable amount of things happening at home. And you have Principals Advisory Committee, MTSSB. I mean, you name it.
Yeah.
There are so many things that do need to get done. And I really appreciated the point that you made about saying which ones can go to the side. Because I actually had, going through the program at UNO through TAP, I had one of the instructors, I was telling them, like, I'm so overwhelmed. This is my first semester of teaching. I'm like, I can't do it all great.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm doing nothing great.
Yeah.
Which really bothers me because I want to be great for these kids.
Yeah.
And he's like, if you are a caring, competent, capable, consistent adult in their life, that's a win. I'm like, and I thought, like, okay, I can do that,
Yeah.
And then from there, it was like, let's start over. So like going into this year, and I talked to my principal about it, and he was so supportive because one of the things that we always drilled in the Marines was be brilliant at the basics. Get brilliant at the basics before you start bolting on. And so a big focus, and I talked to you about this too going into this year, of like, I'm going to really focus on being great in my classroom.
Yeah.
And I have, due to the disseminated authority, due to the clarity of who's responsible for what and who do I go to for what and all that kind of thing, I feel like I really have that.
Yeah.
And I've also been given permission to Ben, we love you. You are not the single white knight that's going to come save the system.
Yep.
You can't do it. You're not going to do it. And the fact that you're even putting this on your shoulders, you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
And it's not helping anybody.
Yeah.
So that giving me that permission to just come in and just work has been wonderful.
Awesome. Man, I wish we had so much more time, but we are out of time. But this is what this show is about, is gathering passionate educators to have important conversations. I hope you join us in the future. Thank you for watching.